G'day legends, Kyle here from Ark Earth. Today we're going to be doing an installation video for the 65 litre and 53 litre water tanks for the troop carrier. So when you receive your water tank package, it'll come in a box just like this. So we'll open her up and see how it arrives. So when you first open up the box, you'll have your plumbing. So you've got a couple of hoses here which go through the body of the vehicle, so you can put them aside. And you'll have your utility panel, which comes with a little card on the magnet and how the magnets work. And then you'll have your utility panel with the plumbing already fitted into it. Next, down the side, you'll have your rear brackets for the water tank, and then the tank itself. So we'll grab that out, and attached to the to the tank is your pump kit, and the front brackets are already taped onto the front of the tank. So out of your package, you have your rear tank brackets, which come with a range of M8 bolts. So there's 2 longer M8 bolts and 4 shorter M8 bolts. So they're all for the rear brackets of the tank. For the front brackets, we have these little assemblies. So just unbolt these and the bottom bolt here. And this is the bracket that you install in the front of the chassis. Now, something to note with this bracket is when you're putting in the bottom bolt is that it comes up from underneath when you install them. So the tools that we need for the water tank installation, I've got them all laid out here. So what I use, I've got a 1/4 inch socket set. You could use a 1/2 inch socket set. I like having a 1/4 inch. And with the 1/4 inch, I've got 3 sockets. I've got an 8mm, a 13mm, and a 12mm socket. I also use a long extension with that. Then we've got a 1/2 inch socket, which I've got a knuckle joint, an extension, and a 13mm socket. I've got a couple of spanners here, so it's handy to have 12mm, 13mm, and a 17mm spanner. If you've got ratchet spanners, even better. And then just a shifter. Shifter's always handy just in case. So in your kit you'll have your hoses. On the center of your hoses you have these fittings. So to take them off, just twist there and they can come off. So to drill out the holes in the body of the troopy, we can use a step drill or a hole saw. The hole size for these are 20mm. So using a 20mm hole saw, or with your step drill, drilling to 20mm. All right, for drilling the holes in the body, you'll need a drill. So we've got 2 drills here that we can use. This is just a regular drill, which most of you have at home. It's a little bit more challenging with this drill, but there's a few techniques I can show you which will make it easy with this. If you have a 90-degree drill though, or a short drill, then these are even better. All right, so before we put the tank up underneath the back of the chassis, we're just going to inspect it, check all the cables, and make sure that it's going to fit and not hang up on anything. It's always a good idea to do this before you lift the tank in, because if you lift the tank up and then something's in the way, it's always a hassle taking it out and then rectifying the problem. So we'll head underneath and check it out. All right, we're underneath the back of the troopy now, and we're looking at the rear of the troopy here. This is a step. This troopy doesn't have a rear bar on it at the moment, so that's why it's quite open here. On this side, we've got the sub-fuel tank and the chassis mount for the sub-fuel tank here. So our water tank will be picking up on this point here, and the chassis point's over here. So when we come under the back of the troopy, what we want to do is we want to inspect the cables. First, we want to inspect the factory wiring loom. So that's this wiring loom here, which is much the same across the range of troopies. On either end, there's a clip here and a clip on that side, which is in the same position. I usually undo these clips just to allow this cable a little bit more room for movement. We do have about 40mm of room above the water tank, so there is a fair bit of space there, but if something is tight, you don't want it getting caught up. These cables that run down to your lights, it's a good idea just to pull a little bit of slack on all those as well, on both sides. And check all these other cables, just make sure that they're all free and move quite easily. For aftermarket accessories, so right here we've got an aftermarket accessory on this. So just check all your aftermarkets and make sure that they also have play and movement. If you have a rear bar here, you'll have probably a trailer plug either on this side or this side, which runs your loom back up to the factory loom. So check with your trailer plug loom that it's also loose and free. On this side we have, which is the driver's side, there is a box here. Now the water tank can be installed with this box in place, although it is quite a tight fit. So I do recommend undoing this bolt here, taking off this, securing it up with the factory loom, and putting the bolt back in place. All right, so just before we install the tank brackets in, I'm just going to do a quick measurement under here. We've had a few people from international areas just asking about the tank fitting with different troopy variants. So an easy check to do is measuring from the rear bar on the chassis here to your sub-fuel tank rail. The measurement is about 295 mil. And you can use the reference of the other holes that we're going to be bolting our brackets into. So if your measurement here is around 295 mil and the bracket holes are all in the same locations on these members of the chassis, then our water tanks will fit with your setup. All right, so we're going to install the front brackets first. So these are the brackets that were mounted on the front of your water tank. So we can take out both of the bolts from the bracket. Now the brackets are installed at this hole on the bottom here and this hole on the bottom here. Now the holes on the bottom line up with a hole above them. So with our bracket, we place it inside and line it up with the hole at the bottom. And then we have our short M10 bolt, which runs up from underneath. So this is quite important that you run these up rather than coming down. So run this up from beneath and then we do up the nut. Now these we only need to do up finger tight. The purpose of this bolt is only to hold the bracket in place while we bolt the tank in. It has no structural integrity and it's actually better if we leave it slightly loose so that the bracket can be manipulated if we need to when we're installing the tank. So on the passenger side, you'll notice that there's a slotted hole here as well. So we're using the hole next to the slotted hole, which lines up with the hole above, which is in the same plane. And the bracket sits nice and flush with the face here. And you want to line this bracket up with the center of the hole above. So on the driver's side, we have the same configuration. We don't have a slotted hole here, so there's only the one hole, which is for our front bracket. So again, placing the bracket on the inside until we see the hole, and then your short M10 bolt, which comes up from underneath, and just doing up the nut finger tight on those, and make sure that your hole at the top is roughly centered. All right, so we've installed the front brackets on the chassis up here. We're going to now install the rear brackets. So the rear brackets are bolted here and here. There's a diagonal section that runs back to the last member on the chassis here. And there's a hole which is on the it's just off center on those diagonal members. Now on the driver's side, it's just it's an empty hole. On the passenger side though, there's a captive nut on the other side. So it's not on all troopies, but about 90% of troopies have a captive nut on the passenger side. All right, so we're over on the passenger side here and we're going to talk about the captive nut that's within the chassis here, if your troopy has one. Now you want to inspect this for dirt and grime and all that kind of stuff. On newer troopies, even for paint, overspray. Before you run the bolt inside there. So a good thing to do is if you can just get your the M8 bolt that comes with the brackets and just try and run it through with your fingers to start off. Now if it tightens up straight away, you probably should look at cleaning out the holes. So you want to check it for all those things that we talked about. If you have a tap, so I've got a M8 tap here. Now some of you might not have this. It is something you can just grab from your hardware store. It is a good way to clean the threads out. If you don't have one though, you can gently clean it out with using the bolt by threading it through with a ratchet and maybe some WD-40 to try and loosen up the threads. What I'm going to use today is the tap that I have here. So I'm just going to put it on an extension. I'm only going to use my hands to do it. I'm just going to run this through just by hand. This is a new Troopy, so it's just going to have a little bit of excess paint potentially. So we're just going to go in and out a couple of times and just loosen it up. And there we go. It's almost loose there. Cool. Now once it's clean, so that had a bit of excess paint in it from the new Troopy. Once it's clean, now we can run the brackets and install those. So we have the passenger side bracket here. Now the passenger side bracket is identified by being the smaller bracket out of the two brackets that are supplied. So they both look much the same. The shorter bracket is for the passenger side. Another way to tell is that the bracket faces forwards like this. It's got one slot on the back and two slots on the front which meet with the tank. So we get our M8 bolt and a large flat washer and place that inside, and then we're going to screw it into the chassis captive nut. Now this bracket here, to start with, we don't want to do it up completely tight. We want to leave them a little bit loose. Okay, so we're going to use our 1/2 inch socket here with the extension and the 13mm socket. So we're just going to do these up until it just nips. And so it's loose like that. So the bracket has movement in all directions, and we're going to leave it parallel to the back of the car, and then we can get onto the other side. All right, so we're going to install the driver's side bracket now. This bracket can be a little bit more challenging than the other side due to there not being the captive nut there. So I find to come out the back from underneath the vehicle is the easiest way to do it. We're going to put a washer over the hole from above. You can just line that up with the hole that was on that cross member there. Now with the bracket, you can hold that in your other hand. We're going to place that up through like this, and we're going to lift it up underneath and put it through the hole and through the washer, and then from above we can then put the nut on top of the setup. Okay, so a few tips on tools to use for this. So I've got a few little tricks that I use that I find really helpful. So 13mm socket, I put a nut within the socket. So I use a little bit of blue tack, or you can use something else, a bit of paper, shove it in there, and then push the nut to the back. So what this does is when you put your other nut in, which you're going to use to thread onto the bolt, it sits flush with the face of the socket, or protrudes just a small amount, so that you can see it, and it has a much better feel to it when you're putting it on. I also use a extension and a knuckle joint. So the knuckle, 13mm socket on an extension. Now when I first put this on, I actually just used this in my hand because you have a bit better feel than using the wrench itself. Alright, so we've placed the washer here over the hole. So from underneath, we're going to lift this up and slot that through the hole and the washer. Now with my ratchet assembly with the nut in the end of the socket, it's going to come down over that and thread the nut on the bolt. Now once you feel it grabbing, you just want to lift the ratchet off so that you don't thread both nuts on the bolt. Alright, so once you feel the nut on the bolt, I'm going to take this out, and you want to pull out this, if you have used this method, pull that nut out so that you don't thread this nut also on the bolt. So we have the driver's side bracket in place. We're just going to tighten her up. So I've grabbed a 13mm spanner, and we're going to put our extension with our knuckle on the ratchet itself. From underneath, I'm going to use the spanner, again through this hole here, and we're just going to nip it up until the bracket is just snug, but we still have movement in the bracket. Okay, so we've installed the 4 brackets, 2 of our rear brackets here, so here and here. So you want to make sure that they're running parallel to each other and that they're loose enough just to move by hand, but not too loose. Now the front brackets, we put in this C channel here, which is where the sub fuel tank connects to. And now we have both of those finger tight on them ready. So all of our brackets are ready to install the tank. Okay, so before we install the water tank, we're going to install the ports that go through the wall here, so bulkhead fittings. Now we're on the driver's side at the moment, and this is the rear quarter panel. So up here you've got your fuel, rear fuel tank. This here is the leaf spring hanger, the rear leaf spring hanger. Now this car is coil converted, so that's why there's no leaf spring here at the moment. And this is the back corner of our chassis here. So the driver's side is the easiest area to run your fittings. We'll run the fittings through this panel here. So when you go inside the vehicle, you can reach down and you can feel these ribs through here. Just check that they're clear of any obstructions, any cables. They usually are, unless something aftermarket's been run. And we're going to run 2 M20 holes in one of these rib sections here. All right, so we're going to drill the 2 M20 holes for the driver's side. I recommend grabbing some safety gear for this, grabbing some ear muffs or ear protection, some glasses, and probably some gloves. Now, when you're drilling this, you're going to be laying under the vehicle, so you have hot metal shards falling on you. So long sleeves is good. Try and wear some clothing that is going to keep you protected. So to start with this, I'm actually going to use the step drill and just get the hole started. Now I'm going to change over to the 20mm hole saw. Once I've got that hole started, I can locate with that, and then I'm going to finish drilling with the hole saw. Let's do it. All right, so if you want to run your plumbing through the passenger side, it can be done, but it's quite challenging. We do have an exhaust in the way, which has a bracket, which is also in the way of where you want to run your M20 holes. And then on the inside quarter panel, there's also another fitting which holds your jack mount. So there's quite a few obstacles on this side. It can be done, just it's slightly more challenging. So if you want to put holes in on the passenger side, the regular drill is actually the best drill to use. And you can use that above the chassis rail up here. And you can come in above that rail and drill your holes in from up there. You can't come from up under here due to the exhaust being in the way. So there is an alternative option on the passenger side. There's an electrical grommet at the back here. I have before pushed the cables through this grommet. It's quite a tight fit, but it can be done. Something also to consider on this passenger side is to make sure that your plumbing is above the chassis and not below the chassis. Due to the exhaust getting hot, you don't want your plumbing to melt on the exhaust system. All right, we're back on the driver's side now. I'm going to show you the drill positions for the driver's side. We're going to start with the standard drill. So with this drill, you can come over the top of the chassis rails like we did on the passenger side. You can have your drill facing forwards of the vehicle or facing it to the rear of the vehicle, and then drilling through the rear quarter panel. All right, if you have a short drill, then you can come on this side of the chassis rail, lift it up into position and drill through here. This is our preferred method of doing it. You just have a little bit more room here, although it is almost as easy using your regular style drill. Before we install the utility panel and the plumbing, we remove this panel here and we remove the jack components. We'll take these off, and we only need to remove this bracket here. And we remove the washer filler. So to remove the panel itself, we remove the fastening clips. Now, if you don't have one of these tools, you can use maybe a knife or something similar. So you want to just lift up underneath the edge and then press them out. They can be quite fragile on older vehicles. The new vehicles seem to be pretty easy, but they're quite easy to damage if you're not careful. So they just come out just like that. So once you've got all of these out, You can just lift the card out of the way. And then we have clear access to the utility panel and clear access in here for the compressor bracket and for our plumbing installation. All right, so we're back under the Troopy. We're on the driver's side quarter panel, and we're going to drill our 2 holes in here for the electrical glands that we run our plumbing through. If you don't have a step drill, what we're going to do today is we're going to use a standard drill bit. I'm using a 4.5mm to run our initial pilot hole. So we're going to change that over. Just more common tool that you guys are going to have. So one quite low and then one up a bit higher, allowing room for the 2 threads. So with your 2 holes, allow about 30 to 40mm distance between them for the 2 M20 threads to go through. Okay, so we've put our 2 pilot holes in here. I've installed the 20mm hole saw. So now I'm going to use those pilot holes to locate. And then we're going to drill out the So that's one done. And that's both of our holes in. All right, so once we've drilled the 2 20mm holes down the bottom here, I use a magnet tool to retrieve all of the swarf or anything that may have fallen inside that's metallic. So run this down through the quarter panel, and you'll find that you grab all of the bits that you've drilled out. So we'll toss that out so it doesn't stay in there and rust. So I usually run quite a few passes through here just to make sure that I've got everything out, because the last thing you want is your Troopy rusting. If you find that when you're running your magnet or a vacuum or however you end up pulling out all the little bits of metal and you can't find the 2 chips that you've cut, often they may just be still attached to the panel itself and that they haven't snapped off completely. So just check for that and make sure that you get 2 of them out. You can also use the vacuum cleaner and check with the torch that it's nice and clean down there. I usually just do this until I have no more shards of metal coming back. It doesn't hurt also to just run the vacuum cleaner through here after too. But I do find the magnet does collect more material than the vacuum will. Sweet, so that's starting to come out really clean. So we've drilled the holes here. We've removed inside all of the metal shavings. I've placed a piece of cardboard behind these holes so that when we paint this section that it doesn't spray into the body of the vehicle. And I've just made a little template here so I can place this over the holes so I don't get too much overspray on what I don't want to paint. So we're going to use just a metal paint. So this is just a Dual Lux. It's enamel gloss. It's in the steel section, paint section in Bunnings. So something that everyone can get pretty easily. And we're just going to give these a little hit. Give it a generous coating. And then we're just going to allow that to dry. Okay, so we've just painted the holes that we've drilled down below. So while that dries, we're going to install the utility panel and the compressor bracket. So to install the utility panel, we need to remove the factory panel. So using an 8mm socket, I'm going to take out these 4 factory nuts off the factory vent. So we're going to reuse these, so make sure that you keep them handy. So once you've taken out all 4 bolts, the factory vent needs to be pulled out from the outside of the vehicle. So we've removed the 4 nuts off the back of the factory vent. So to remove, pull the cover through. Comes off in 2 pieces. So that's the face. Sometimes this can be a little bit sticky, so just give it a little jiggle and then it pulls out. All right, we've removed the factory vent from here. Now before we install the utility panel, we're going to make room for the compressor bracket. So we've got the ARB Twin driver's side compressor bracket, which goes in the space here. So before we install that, we'll just loosen these clips, electrical clips here. Now you can use a screwdriver or just pinch these nice and firmly and they'll come loose. Now with these cables, there's actually a few options. You can run them above the bracket. Now depending on who's wired up this car, sometimes they're looser, sometimes they're a little bit shorter. Sort of determines where you're going to run the bracket. Often I just run them underneath the bracket. You can run them under the compressor but within the bracket or above. On this one they're quite tight, so we can try and loosen them up a little bit more. Let's have a go at that. Alright, so with the cables on this Troopy, I'm actually going to run them inside the bracket. So we get our driver's side of the bracket, I'm going to lift the cables up and slide this in underneath. So these will just sit in there for now. So once you've got the bracket in place, we can put this M5 bolt in through the slot down the bottom here. We're just going to do that up finger tight so that we still have some movement in the bracket for the utility panel installation. Just like that. Now once this compressor is installed to this bracket, these cables will sit just above it like that. With the compressor, unfortunately we don't have the compressor with us for this install, so we have to install the bracket without the compressor, but we recommend installing the compressor before you put the bracket inside. So install the compressor on the bracket and then fit the compressor and bracket together with the utility panel. So when you receive your utility panel in the package, it'll come with the fittings if you've ordered the plumbing kit already installed. So everything's already ready to go inside the panel. So to install the panel, we've removed the factory panel and we've put the compressor bracket on the inside. And we're just going to slot that in, push that in. Now from the back side, we can reattach the nuts and lock the panel in place. Once we come back around to the back side, we've installed the panel here and we've got it coming through the compressor bracket. We can then install the factory nuts back on the threads here. So we can do those finger tight to start with. When doing these up, you want to do them all up equally. So don't just do one up before the others. If when you're installing your utility panel and your compressor bracket and you're having a little bit of trouble to line things up, it is a lot easier to do with two people. So one person installing the panel from the outside and someone on the inside here holding the bracket in place. So we've nipped those nuts up finger tight. Just going to use a 8mm on the ratchet. And we're going to do them up equally, so just going to get that one to bite and then come over and do the others. So these nuts we don't want to do crazy tight, so we're just nipping them up. So when you take them off the factory vent, just take note of how much tension that was applied to them. And there we go, utility vent secure, compressor bracket secured, so it's got 4 bolts at the top and the one at the bottom. So we can go ahead and tighten up our bottom bolt there, and then that's all locked in. So we painted earlier the inside of that quarter panel. It's now dry, so we can install these gland fittings into the wall there. Before I install these, I take the locking nuts off them and I just apply a bead of silicone. Now this is a like a roof and gutter silicone, so it's good for outdoor use. And I just run it along the thread like this, so that when you push it up against the panel, that it has another seal for the weather. So just like that. So we do that for both of these. And then once we've done that, we can install these into the panel. Right, so we've got our 2 gland fittings, silicone attached. We are going to push each one into here. So we'll start with the top one, and we just seat it in there. And if you notice on the side of these fittings, they have like a square hexagon shape. So I make sure that they're vertical so that they actually sit within the ribs. So push them in nice and firm. You'll see the silicone bead out around the base of the fitting. So once the 2 glands are installed, we can go around to the inside and we're going to put these locking nuts on the inside panel. All right, so we have all our brackets installed. We've put our plumbing in the quarter panel here, so we're ready to put the tank in. So I find it really handy to have a trolley jack. That way you can put the tank on the front of the jack, slide it in underneath and jack it straight up into position. Now there's a few different scenarios depending on rear bars, how high your troopy is, how low the troopy is, whether or not you have a trolley jack or another jack that you can use. It's best to be comfortable when you're installing the tank. You don't want to be laying underneath it trying to lift it in place and put the bolts in. In this scenario we've got this coil converted troopy. It's probably got 4 or 5 inches of lift, so we're going to have to do something a little bit different to what we'd normally do since the jack is actually going to max out on height. So when we're ready, we're going to stick this underneath, we're going to jack it up, we're going to try and prop up the tank a little bit, and yeah, we'll show you what we do. So once you've got the water tank up in line with the brackets, then we can install the bolts in the front brackets of the tank. So on the front brackets that we placed in the chassis, we've got these locking nuts that we've welded on here. So when you do thread the 2 front bolts in, they're actually self-locking on that. You can apply thread locker to the bolts as well, but it's not 100% necessary. Okay, so once the tank's up in place, we can then put the bolts through the front brackets. So these are the longer M10 bolts with the washer. So just going to reach through and we're going to find the bracket that we put in for the front and just finger tight, find that hole and thread that. So there we go, that's the driver's side done. Scoot over to the passenger side and put that one in. So on the passenger side, same again, we're going to use the larger M10 bolt with the washer. And we're going to feed it through and find that hole and thread that one. So just going to do these finger tight to start with on both sides, and then we're going to do the rear brackets. Once they're all in, then we can start tightening up the tank. For our rear brackets, we have 4 M8 short bolts, we have a spring washer, and we have a hardened stainless washer as well. Now on these, I recommend also using thread locker. I use a blue medium grade thread locker. You can also use a red thread locker as well. And we'll need a ratchet with a 13mm socket. So before I install these, I just give a little dab of Loctite on each one. Like so, and then we make these up and we can install them onto the tank. So with our rear brackets, we've got them loose still, so we can adjust them so that they line up with our holes on the rear brackets here. So it's a good idea just to check that both brackets are lining up. Sometimes they're actually at slightly different heights. We can adjust this by adjusting the jack. So line up one side and we'll install the bolts into those. So lucky with this troopy we're doing today that there's no rear bar, so we actually have really good access in the back here to do up these. So to start off, we're just going to do these up finger tight. We're going to make sure that we can get all of the bolts in first and then we can start tensioning everything. So that's the passenger side. We can go ahead and do the driver's side. Now the driver's side is a slightly different position, so I just have to bring the tank up just a tiny bit so that those holes line up. And there we go. Once all of the rear bolts are in, we can go ahead and start tightening them up with our ratchet. So just give them all a nip to start with. So so don't tension them yet.
Now before we tighten, we can just go through now and just nip up all the brackets. So these rear brackets, we can tension the passenger side, we can tension the driver's side, and we're also going to tension the front bolts. So we're going to get them all snug, and then at the very end, once all of them are snug, we're going to just go through and just do our final tension. So we've got all the bolts snug on the tank, so we can get rid of the jack now. And we can go ahead and now do our final tension and make sure that everything's tight. For the front brackets, we're going to use our 17mm ring spanner. So you can get it from underneath or above, find a good comfortable position, and we're going to tension the front bolts. All right, now we're on the passenger side. So again, with our 17mm ring spanner, it's going to tension our front bracket bolt. We've tensioned up our front brackets. Now we're at the rear of the tank. We're going to tension the 6 rear bolts on the tank. We'll put all the torque specs in the description of the video. So when you get your plumbing, you'll notice that on each end they're both marked. So this one, for instance, is valve and pump. So this is the water outlet, and this pipe has a breather written on it and breather. So when you feed them up, you know at each end which is which hose. All right, let's install them up into the glands that we put in. You can start with the top one and just push it up into the vehicle. If you have another set of hands, it's handy for someone to pull it at the other end. So there we go. So that one's the breather. So we can also connect that down onto the breather, which is the top fitting on the water tank. So we'll push that in place. There we go. And then we have the valve and pump and the water fitting in the utility panel. So let's feed that up as well. So sometimes they get stuck, so we'll go up to the top and then we'll pull this one through, and this other end is going to connect into the Y fitting on top of the valve and the pump. All right, so on the inside we have our 2 hoses that we've fed up through the glands in the wall. We're going to connect them into the utility panels, so I can look at the tops of these and I can read breather and water in and out. So the water in and out is the blue fitting, the breather is the sintered brass fitting in the vent, so make sure you plug them into the right fitting. With these fittings as well, they're a push fit, so push the hose in nice and firm until it hits, like it bottoms out on the fitting itself, and then you can pull back on the fitting and make sure it's secure. If you do want to remove these, you just need to hold down this ring and then you can pull the hoses back out again. With these hoses, you want to make sure that it's a nice clean cut on the end. So if you do make any changes to these hoses, make sure you've made a nice clean cut. And then when you seat them, they'll seal nice and tightly. The last port here on the utility panel is for the compressor. So unfortunately at the moment with this build, we don't have the compressor. So at a later stage, we can pull this bracket back out, install the ARB Twin Compressor on it, put it back in, reconnect up the bolts, and then we can run our outlet from the compressor into this hose, which is the yellow fitting in the utility panel. All right, we've installed the utility panel, the compressor bracket's in place, all of our plumbing is all plumbed up and ready to go. So we can just put this panel back on and finish it all up. All right, so we've just finished up. We've installed the 65 litre water tank, utility panel and a compressor bracket. So this car's all ready to go. Just to wrap up though, I just wanted to have a quick chat about stainless
fittings and fixings. So while we're installing the water tank, just a few things to be mindful of with stainless steel fixings. You want to make sure when you are doing up all your fittings that you're going nice and easy. You're starting using your fingers only, and then you're using hand tools and not power tools. So no rattle guns or anything like that, because if you do cross thread stainless, unfortunately you're not going to be able to get it undone again, and you have to get a grinder in there and chop it off. Another little trick, just to make sure that you don't cross thread, you can also apply a little bit of WD-40 to your thread before you install the fitting, and that will ensure that it smoothly goes in. If you do find yourself trying to do it by hand and it's just not lining up, it's not working for you, don't try and force it in. 100% it's going to cross thread, and it's going to be the worst. It's going to ruin your day, so don't do it. Take it back out, realign things, make sure you're comfortable, and then install it finger tight to start with, and then hand tools, so ratchets, spanners, nice and gentle. If anything doesn't feel right, stop straight away and assess the situation. So at the moment we have our 53 65 litre water tanks which go in the rear of the Troopy. That's what we've installed today. Now these water tanks are suitable for 75 series, 78 series, the new facelift models of the Troopies from 24, 25 and into the future. It's compatible with all rear bars that we're aware of on the market at the moment, like your Kmart, Thornburns, Cruiser Company bar, Ark Earth rear bar obviously. The only Troopy that it's not compatible with is it's a petrol variant usually, which has a rear tyre which is actually mounted under the back of the Troopy. So there's no sub-tank in those Troopies. They have a rear tyre which is actually mounted on a bracket under the rear. So that's the only Troopy that we've found which we can't mount our tanks. So it's quite rare, and in Australia there's hardly any. Some of them are in the Middle East and America. Our tank also goes with coil conversion Troopies. So this Troopy that we've installed on the video today is a full coil conversion from J-Max. So 100% compatible. There's actually more room with the coil conversion because the coils actually go forward of the diff and not so much back of the diff. Yep, so all of our information, like torque specs, a few more details we're going to put in the description below this video. So go down there, all our contact details will be there, links to our website, and again, hit us up if you need anything. We're always here to help out and make it easy for you guys to travel and tour with our products.